Okay. Very good. Yeah. Is that the one that Allison still talks about, that you got the one finger salute? God only knows. I'm not sure how many Lake Stevens ones were. Okay, good evening. Like to call the Mill Creek Design Review Board to order. I'm Dave Hambleton. I'm the chairman. And we're live in the room here, and we are also on a Zoom meeting. If anybody signed in on the Zoom meeting?
Yes, Ken is on and Russia is also on the Zoom meeting.
Okay, so those are our other two members. So we have a full board tonight, which is nice. Okay, so we're in order. So would you like to do the roll call, please?
Yes, David Embleton.
Here.
Did you?
Here.
Oh, sorry. Mark Bills.
Here.
Russia Yamini.
Here.
Yamini here.
Yep. Yamini
Here.
ahead? Okay, you are ahead of me. Thank you. I think that's the end of roll call. I think I got everybody.
Sybil, I'm here. Ken.
Oh, Ken, sorry. I knew I was missing somebody.
And I apologize if there's noise in the background. I'm sitting in an airport right now, but I apologize.
Thanks for dialing in.
Yes,
good.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And so we have the approval of the minutes. The minutes were distributed to the members electronically. Have people had a chance to review them, and they have any additions, deletions, or a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve, Brett.
Move to approve.
Okay. Want to turn your mic on? Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Good.
I move they be approved as submitted.
Okay. So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded to approve the December meeting. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So we have a unanimous decision on the approval of the December meeting minutes. And so we have one new business item on our agenda for the evening, and it's the Venture Church unpermitted extension. So with that, I'll turn it over to the staff for their presentation, please.
Yeah, this is a quick one, Mr. Chairman. A quick history on this. Back in 2014, this body approved sorry, I'm trying to pull up my notes here for a minute. Oh, there it is. Quick history. Back in 2024, the design review board approved an addition to the church building. However, during construction and during inspection by our building official, it was noticed that an additional part of the building has been added to it without permit. And I'm going to share my screen for other people too. Okay, so the intended unpermitted addition is for classroom, and also increasing the square footage of the building in total. Back in 2024, as you can see on this picture, on the top was what was approved, and currently the unpermitted addition is below in the staff meeting. The applicant did keep the color scheme as approved in the 2024 permitted application. It's just the addition to your right that we're looking at. I also included a design review guidelines. There isn't anything drastically different from what was approved back in 2024, except for the addition. So the analysis of that review chart or table is part of the staff report that was uploaded. So city finds that as conditioned, the proposed building elevation and landscaping are consistent with design guidelines set forth in the building code. Based on this finding, that the building elevation materials colors will be as presented, and I'm sure it is already what it is because it's already built. The additional condition to this is that landscaping will be included, especially on the residential lot or side of the property. The property that abuts any residential building will be heavily either fence or hedge, evergreen hedge, just to have that buffer and to prevent, not prevent, but to screen those two uses. And I will also note that as code enforcement, I have been getting complaint from the neighbors. So I think this will suffice or appease neighbors with complaint that part of fences have been taken off during construction. So I think this will resolve that complaint. That concludes my presentation.
Okay. When I looked at the plans a few days ago, was it a two-story addition or did just the top floor get expanded?
Originally back in 2024, it was a two-story. And the addition to it is, so there was a walkway, and on top of that walkway, that was where the addition has been added to it. So there's a roof and then an additional I think 12,000 over.
1,100 square, like 1,100 to 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So do we have any questions or comments?
I have a question. When I looked at the original plans, it looked like there was a patio there.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and that was part of the addition originally?
That was part of the original building.
Oh, the original building, okay.
You removed that structure to do the same.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest using mic for people online to.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
So I guess my question is then that if there was just a patio there, then the appropriate foundation was put in. Okay. I had wondered if there was a 6-inch foundation with a 12-inch footing or an 8-inch foundation with a 16-inch footing. It makes a difference.
Right.
Doing
No,
it
we
before.
were working with the original structural engineer. So structurally, everything was there that needed to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and could you
It
identify?
makes sense. I'm sort of surprised you didn't do that originally, just to keep the continuity of the building, the elevation.
Yeah, we wanted to, but we were just exceeding our budget. So we got to this point because the contractor gave us some awesome discounted pricing during construction. That's why we're taking the less than ideal approach, but it's really working out well to get this
Okay.
to get what we
And
got.
could you identify yourself for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Phil Frisk. I'm the architect for the project.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the executive pastor and the finance there. Alex McGregor, I'm in charge of the project for the church. Yeah, originally Phil wanted to put that room in, but I cut it because of this cost. When we were building the addition as permitted, there came some drainage problems because we had 3 different slopes combining back behind the wall. And the contractor had to tear into that rooftop area already. He says, we should just extend this out. And I'm like, well, cost. And he says, you know what, I got to tear this all apart in order to get this not to drain, not to have problems down the road where I'm coming to solve this. And so we called Phil and Phil drew up some plans. We brought it in. The contractor brought it into the city, talked to Justin back before this was going on. And Justin said, yeah. Did it just walk automatically or? We lost the mic in high school. So it just. Well, I didn't turn it off.
Oh, that's back.
Okay, so yeah, it seemed like it was just going to be a minor revision. We brought the plans in, talked to the city.
He's lost it again, Sybil.
It just turned off.
All right, use this one then.
So anyways, yeah, brought the plans and talked to the city, had the architectural drawn up. We thought it would be a much quicker process. So we weren't hiding anything. We were very clear coming in beforehand, but the construction did proceed faster than the permitting process.
Okay, good. Let me
And-
see, Jeff. Yeah, so Sybil, we don't have on our agenda, there's not a public hearing on this, right?
Well, this is a public meeting.
It's a
so
public meeting.
You do have to call for a public,
Okay, okay.
I did have a question. I was looking at the site plans. Did not specify where exactly are the other properties. Are they towards the north side of it? And where are we going to be providing the additional landscaping, the evergreen trees?
Well, I think there might be a little bit of confusion. When we built the building, there is already fences up and significantly high. I mean, we're talking 70-foot trees there. The issue that Sybil brought up is when we expanded the driveway, which is on the northeast side of the property, the driveway went from 2 lanes to 3. We expanded that and pulled the fence down and built a new fence. So there was about 8 weeks where the fence was down. That's the complaint she was referring to because they called us too. And we told them we'll get it back up, and it took about 8 weeks, but we actually built a taller fence there for that neighbor. And his issue was as people drive through the parking lot, that their houses are kind of down, our parking lot's elevated, so the lights were shining in. So we put a 6-foot fence in as opposed to a 5-foot to give them that extra height. So the fence has already been replaced. It was probably 8 weeks that it was down. So that was not on this backside of the property. That was the driveway side on the front. But our entire property is surrounded already with, and this was from our 5 years ago, trees and fencing. So it's already fenced.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address this subject? Okay, well. Okay, you can do that.
Yeah, hi, Dan Strandy. I'm 2131 138th Place Southeast in Mill Creek. Been a resident of Mill Creek for 40 years, and I attend Venture Church. I've been working with Alex as a layperson and over this whole project. And actually, in my career, I spent many years design review, construction of major facilities, spent 4 years on the Snohomish County Planning Commission, and I'm happy to say that this project, I speak highly in favor of it. It's unfortunate that our construction process jumped a little bit ahead of the permitting process, but we have attempted all throughout this to be very transparent with the city and expressing where we are, how we're going about it. And so just asking for your approval for us to proceed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have any other questions or
Any
comments?
comments from Justin? From
Justin,
planning?
any comments?
No comments.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think that about wraps up our testimony and the facts and data on it. So could we have a motion maybe?
My motion, we approve these amendments, if you will, to the original plans. And judging by the drawings, it makes sense. I'm surprised it wasn't done originally.
Was a money issue. Okay,
Yeah.
is there a second for the motion?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion that's been moved in second to approve the Venture Church plan. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and have a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so did both people remotely? I think your mic's not on, Ken, but
Oh, I approve.
I
Okay.
approve.
okay. So we have a unanimous decision to approve the church plan. So is there any other business before we have one more item. So we have the Southtown Center design guidelines update.
yes,
Jill?
I,
Okay, thank you.
Walk you all to the door.
It looks better now with this addition than it would have.
Yeah.
What's our next process with
No, I can't answer that because I've never done permitting with the city. I mean, I've done planning commission, a bunch of other stuff.
Okay, so
I just have to ask Justin that. It depends on their workload, how many people.
Wondering, like, should we have included when we asked for permit? Because the narrative says that the contractor wants to go to the city and the permitting was supposed to be subsequently provided, but they weren't able to.
I think,
Probably a timing issue.
I think they, the city basically approved it even though the permit wasn't in place yet. And the contractors there all set up and going, and that's why they got such a good deal. So they just went ahead and forged on, and this is asking for forgiveness instead of permission.
They're just trying to make it legal at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Go back and dot the i's and cross the t's.
Yeah.
Are we ready to proceed with the presentation?
Yes, we are, Justin.
All right, well, thank you for having me, Design Review Board members. It's nice to see you all again. I'm pretty excited to share some of the progress we've done on the South Town Center sub-area. So today we're going to review the preliminary draft of the South Town Center plan. We go over some of the background and guiding principles, reviewing the draft, and some next steps. So first of all, when we started the project, we had 3 primary goals. 1, we wanted to extend and enhance Town Center, extend it all the way from the southern edge of Town Center down to 164th, and the property is directly below 164th. We wanted to support long-term community and economic vitality, expanding housing choices and employment opportunities, and strengthening the city's tax base. We also want to align growth with infrastructure, mobility, sustainability, making sure that all of our land use, transportation, and stormwater was planned in a responsible and coordinated method. And then moving on, in addition to those goals, in August, we held a volunteer board workshop with all the volunteer boards of the city. And the result of that workshop was 4 primary interests of those who were there. One was increasing the walkability for pedestrians in the sub-area. Another was increasing the diversity of retail opportunities. Another important goal was preserving and enhancing the natural aspects of the Greenbelt and North Creek Trail. And finally, adding community spaces. There's no parks in the sub-area. There's nowhere to gather or hold events, so that was another important goal. So we took those 3 original priorities and the volunteer board priorities, and we worked with our consultant, GGLO, to develop this draft, and I'll get started on that. So we have 3 alternatives we're looking at in our environmental impact statement. Alternative 1 is the baseline. It assumes that there is no zoning changes to the sub-area, and it's going to be developed just as the rules are right now. So that's a 60-foot height limit and no commercial use requirements. Alternative 2 is a higher density alternative where the height limit would increase to 85 feet, and this would include the highest commercial use requirements. Alternative 3 is sort of a mix of those. It'd be a mixed density alternative where the height would vary from 60 to 85 feet depending on where in the sub-area it is, and has a slightly lower commercial use requirement than the higher density alternative. So the current neighborhood framework, you can see there's a map here. There are 7 large super blocks that have limited intersections and streets that pedestrians can walk on. The public realm is defined by large surface parking and significant building setbacks. It's fairly auto-oriented with wide lanes. I think Mill Creek Boulevard has 16 or 18-foot lanes. There's a lot of room to work with. And it's not great for pedestrians. And we also, Mill Creek Boulevard between 527 and 164th often functions as a cut through for traffic to avoid the highway. So as part of the plan, we're looking at changing that framework. And we have here a side-by-side view of what we have now and what we have proposed as the new framework, which I'll show here. So the main improvements for this new framework include breaking up those super blocks into smaller block sizes that are more pedestrian friendly. It extends the character of Main Street all the way through the sub area. It includes intersection improvements. And it's much better for pedestrians. It triples the number of intersections from 6 to 18 and reduces crossing distances from 900 feet to 350 feet. So that 900 feet is from 164th to 162nd. There's nowhere for pedestrians to cross.
Mark has a question.
Oh, yes.
Justin, a question for you. You're breaking up this into smaller blocks.
Yes.
Is that done by ownership or just by somebody drawing out a drawing?
So, I mean, the plan starts with the drawing, and we're saying, as it develops, here's where we want the streets to be. And so, as you know, if a developer wants to redevelop their property, then they would have to follow this framework going forward.
So am I to assume then that these blocks are all owned by the same party, each individual block? Or do you have multiple owners like we had in the town center when there were 5 owners when it first started? And they were all bidding each other to try and outdo the rents.
Yeah, so there are a number of owners. A large section of the south block is owned by one property owner. However, the remaining properties in the sub area are mostly owned by different entities. So, I mean, we envision this plan taking this is a long range plan. It could take up to maybe 20 years even to complete. And it would be done in pieces. So once one property decides that they want to redevelop, they would have to follow the plan, but it's not envisioned to happen all at once. It's going to be a phased process.
Sure. Well, part of the reason for my question is you take example, the QFC.
Mhm.
Okay. The south building there is fully leased.
Mm-hmm.
Chase owns its pad.
Yeah.
Firestone owns its pad. The Shell Station owns its pad. So you've got 3 separate owners with definite use. So now you have the rest of the property and limited parking, et cetera. So the proposal that comes up, I take it the city's going to guide it. They're going to set some guidelines so that whoever owns the rest of the property beyond those 3 pads then would presumably follow those guidelines. As far as I know, QFC was under a lease, which is gone, and the rest of those tenants are all under a lease. The leases, I'm sure, vary in length and duration. But I was just curious of that one because it's somewhat unique.
Yeah, and I should stress that this plan isn't going to force anyone to sell or redevelop. It's saying that when and if they choose to, they would have to follow these standards.
Gotcha. Okay, that's an important thing. I think that in your public relations with the community, I think that's important to put in there so that people know that, yeah, if at some point in the future they want to do this, then they have to follow the guidelines. That's, I think, would put some people's mind at rest, not thinking that, oh, by the way, you have until next year to get all this done.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
On that note, question. So for example, we have Safeway right now.
Mhm.
And the framework, with new framework, would they have to go, or are you saying they'll have to develop according to this framework?
Yeah, so that would be if the owner of that Safeway decided they want to rebuild, they would have to follow this framework, but it's not forcing them to rebuild. I
Okay.
mean, the city could, if it wanted to, purchase properties to redevelop to speed the process along, but there are no plans to do that at this time.
And to be sure, I think the timeline by which this area gets redeveloped is a little bit dependent on city decision makers as well, in terms of what kind of development incentives we want to create or how we want to pursue property massing and property acquisition and stuff like that if we wanted to go that route. That being said, based on some of the initial analysis that we've done, there's a pretty clear use case in terms of what the highest and best use is for these properties. And for some of these structures that are approaching 40-year, there's a gremlin in the electronic system today. The use case, some of these buildings are approaching approaching the end of their useful life. And so there's a pretty compelling case for a lot of property owners, or at least for the landowners, to pursue redevelopment at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to develop a framework that's attractive for the property owners to, You know, if you have a charter framework that if they redevelop, it's gonna increase the value of their property. So it's a net gain to the city and to the property owners.
Yeah, housekeeping, reason I'm cutting in, we will have to restart the Zoom. But we are, for the folks that are online, we're gonna be using the same link to come back in. Would that allow me to use the same link? Yes, so stick with us. If it dies, just, please rejoin us. But
Or on
that's
the
that's our
instead of the
housekeeping.
professional version,
Yeah.
limited to 40 minutes. It was the same thing last week. Yeah.
There's 5 minutes left. Mhm. Yeah, so additional aspects of that framework include traffic calming measures such as narrowed travel lanes, curb bulbs at intersections, added on-street parking, and raised street intersections.
Can I
Additionally,
ask-
there
Sorry, one question. What is curb bulbs?
curb bulb is where the sidewalk at an intersection. How would I explain? You at an intersection where imagine there's parking on either side of the street. That parking becomes a raised curb where it narrows the distance pedestrians have to cross the street. I should probably include a image of that for future presentations. I don't know if
Well, is it basically a piece of sidewalk that pokes out in front of the parking?
exactly.
That's what I imagine by a bulb.
It'd be like
Yeah.
the old Starbucks then. It's got, before you cross the street, the parking area in front of Starbucks has got a concrete.
Exactly, yeah, like
Yeah.
in town center.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that as well.
They're also sometimes referred to as curb extensions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Additionally, there is new continuous protected bike lanes along Main Street and Mill Creek Boulevard. And probably the most important, or is for me the most interesting, is a new Central Park, as well as new trail connections to North Creek Trail. So in terms of landscape and open space, as I just mentioned, there's going to be 4 things. There's going to be a new Central Park. That's number 1 here. There's going to be a new Sponge Park, number 2, and a Gateway Park, number 3, as well as new trail connections. I'm going to go through some more details about those parks now.
Real quick, just to before you get started, who's going to pay for that? It's all
That's a-
privately held. Now you're talking about parks. Now you're talking about city. You're talking of maybe a bond issue or something to finance it.
Yeah, great question. It's probably going to be a lot of different funding streams cobbled together. The city has park impact fees that developers will be paying to fund new parks. Additionally, there's going to be stormwater facilities underneath 2 of these parks, which we can get grants to cover some of those stormwater facilities, as well as latecomer agreements from developers to help pay for those stormwater facilities. So it's going to be a combination of impact fees, grants, and we haven't identified all the sources yet, but it's going to be.
Sure.
That's one
Yeah,
thing that's being
I've lived here a few years, since 1979, before we were a city. And I've watched the city go crazy on parks.
Mhm.
And some of them have made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I mean, parks are fine, but sales tax producing entities are much more important to the city as far as revenue streams. And unfortunately, with the Buffalo Farm over on 132nd and 35th, the idea was great to make it commercial, but it's all turned residential, which doesn't pay taxes worth a hoot. Whereas the sales tax revenue that should have been generated over there, unfortunately, will never happen. So when we start taking space that could be used for sales tax generation, and I'm not talking a real estate office or some of the other services we have around here that pay no sales tax, but a true retail type thing, that would be much more important, I think, to the property owner who's having their taxes go up 5% this year.
So that's great feedback. So just part of the environmental impact statement, we included an economic analysis that evaluates fiscal impacts from sacrificing, so to speak, commercial space for residential. And what we actually find is that to the contrary, multifamily residential property tax actually is more tax efficient than most commercial uses. And that when you have a mixture of dedicated residential next to mixed use areas, in all of our scenarios, we're likely anticipating a net impact, a net benefit to revenues. Additionally, I hear what you're saying in terms of making, we look at you're referring to the eGov area, correct?
I'm sorry.
You're talking about the Buffalo Ranch development area, right? So as we get into the frontages, we're kind of taking a different approach and trying to take a lessons learned approach from kind of an autopsy, what happened, what went wrong at eGov, the East Gateway area.
There was a lot that went wrong.
There was a lot that went wrong.
Still wrong.
And there's and opportunities to fix too. But there was a lot of things that went wrong. And that's one of the things that when it said, that was one of the first instructions to our architects and then also to the economists that we hired, was to really look at what happened in eGov and look at kind of what the fiscal impacts of what it's like to shift from to bring more residential uses in here. And we're pretty confident about, at least from what the analysis is showing. Recording.
Okay, I heard what you said about residential. I spent 14 years on the Board of Equalization and also the Boundary Review Board.
Sure.
And I saw big annexations like in East Hill of Kent and down by Pacific Algona. And I saw the analysis that was done, where the economic analysis done on residential versus commercial versus apartments. Multifamily is not a big income producer for a city tax-wise. And so having seen some of that and the people who've presented it and the city's analysis of it, that's why I raised the question. Residential typically doesn't pay for itself. Multifamily, a little more, but not much. And it's the income tax, the sales tax revenue that's so critical. And that's the thing I would be concerned about in this whole operation. And that's why I've seen these three alternatives and looking at number B there for maximizing sales tax revenue. Because if it's not a sales tax revenue, the Mill Creek View, 5% increase in my property taxes, that's where it's going to go. If we don't have enough sales tax generation, because it has to be backfilled by property owners. So that's why I raised the question.
Sure. It's a valid point. The thing I would also keep in mind, and I know we're a little bit afraid from typical purview of design review board.
No, I realize that, but I'm trying to understand the
sure.
rationale here.
I think the other, there's a couple other components too, is that when you reduce commercial area and go to a focused commercial use, what we're going to be doing, and this is going to be part of our future slides with the frontage, is we're going to be more specific than even the North Town Center about what kind of retail is allowed or what kind of commercial activity is allowed on those frontages, so that we can make sure it's not,
It's not real estate offices that don't pay any
exactly.
sales tax.
It's more.
It's not a service. It's a retail.
Correct. So, and the other thing that also to consider with fiscal impacts is, as you recall, when they did the property tax increase, they also adopted a utility tax. And the utility tax is about as closest thing we got to a head tax in a lot of ways, because as you add X amount of people, most of those people have phones, most of those people have utility services, and so there's additional revenue streams that are created from there. But kind of the main point that I want to point is, in order to make sure that the commercial area, that the commercial activity that we have in the town center is as productive as possible, we have to have, I think, two necessary ingredients to make that gumbo work. Is we got to have the density around those retail businesses and restaurants to make sure that they have a revolving amount of customers, but also we have to have the regulations in place to make sure that we are having actual, actual high quality retail and actual retail uses in those commercial spots that generate sales tax.
Well, it's a step in the right direction. Excuse me, Justin, now that I've interrupted your presentation.
No worries. All right, so the North Gateway Park, again, that's this number 3 at the top here. Its location is if you come down the hill, Mill Creek Boulevard towards South Town Center, you're going to end up hitting this Gateway Park. And it's kind of cool because we're calling it Gateway Park because it's sort of like the new gateway to North Creek Trail. It's a small park, but it's great because coming down from Mill Creek Boulevard, you see the trail, you see the green belt in the background. So it really exposes you to the nature in that green belt. And we're envisioning, if you look at, there's these red highlighted areas, those are envisioned as retail areas. So you can imagine perhaps a cafe or a restaurant on either side of these parks. And then we have this proposed or possible seating area. I should say all these drawings of the parks are all just ideas. They're not what we're going to do. These are what we could do. They'll go through a whole design process with the Parks Board and so forth. So I don't think this is exactly how it's going to be built. It's just an example of what it could be.
Just one thing to kind of add, as you'll see with the way that we're thinking about the parks and the way that we're thinking about the commercial design and the retail experience, is we're really leaning into this idea that one of the biggest points of feedback that we got from the community during our big outreach push over the summer and from our volunteer board meeting was that the North Creek Trail is one of the most important assets that the city has. It's iconic, it's beautiful, it's one of the best I think it's an economic development asset. It draws people to our city. And so the idea is to create a retail and living experience that has a relationship with the forest, so that the trail winds in and into the forest, out onto the main street, back into the forest, back into a park-like setting. So as you're walking in this trail, you'll come out and there's more retail experience and stuff like that. And the other idea is that as you create these retail experiences in these dining areas and stuff like that, you're able to have views of that beautiful forested area. The reason why I think that's important is, one, it shows a synergy between the forest and the retail area that I think really identifies with Mill Creek values and Mill Creek brand. I mean, you just walk through our residential areas and you see this blending of old growth forest with like little communities inside these forests. But the other important thing about this is it creates I think a unique experience that is I think it's a unique experience that will set apart Town Center from many other downtown areas in Snohomish County and even North King County. So that's kind of the idea, is that if we're going to, from a design approach, have a downtown area that kind of reflects our love of these beautiful trees and the forested area, let's try to create something that can also attract more attention and more investment and more dollars into our community.
Justin, on this map, it shows a cycle track.
Mhm.
Where's the parking going to be if you have a cycle track going down through the middle of this development?
There's going to be, on the street in Mill Creek Boulevard?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a customer and I'm going to go hit one of these retail places and now I see I got a bike path.
We have a
Yeah.
future slide for that.
Yeah, all the streets in the sub area are proposed to have parking, as well as, in addition to bike facilities, if there are bike facilities.
And those are curb bulbs on the drawing.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, this is an example of a curb bulb, right? Yeah, so it narrows the width where the parking would be, is now that curb extension to provide a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians, or provide more planting space for trees and shrubs and so forth.
When I was on the planning commission, that's when we decided the 45-degree angle parking. What's the parking proposed in here? 45-degree angle or parallel?
Primarily parallel, but there is also angled parking as well. So here's a mock-up of what that central park could look like. You can see at the north end, there is a crushed rock plaza. And just below that, there is a pedestrian path that would connect 161st to Main Street, as well as a pavilion, a stage, a central gathering space to hold events or concerts in the park or any kind of large activities. And then below that, a playground. And now, possibly the most unique aspects of this open space is the sponge park. The idea of the sponge park is, well, I guess what it is now is it's where the pond is. The pond is it's not providing good. It was built as a stormwater facility, but it's not providing good stormwater detention or filtration. It's just not working very well for the stormwater. So the sponge park is an attempt to meld the stormwater facility into a park area. I'm going to show, I'm just going to skip down to what that would look like. So you can see, where did I want to stop here?
You're going to use vaults then.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there'd be a vault under the central park, which I'm showing here in dark blue, and then a smaller vaulted area under that sponge park. So you can see there's vaults beneath the central park and the sponge park. During dry weather or low rain events, the stormwater would flow through those detention facilities and under the sponge park and out into North Creek. But during high rain events, during storms or 10 or 25-year storms, that sponge park would then would fill up with stormwater. Fortunately, since it never rains in summer, you can use that sponge park for recreational activities all summer long. It'd only be in winter that ever get too mushy.
Well, that's one of the reasons many of the retention ponds are concrete bottomed, is to use them when they're dry. Question, your vault underneath the park, I assume that's going to replace the existing drainage pond out there. So it's going to cover everything out there in what is now Safeway and all the rest of that. All that drainage would come in to that vault and then go across under Sponge Park.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
It will show in future slides, but essentially between the vault underneath the central park and the sponge park, we would be covering all the stormwater retention needs for the entire Southtown Center basin.
And the outlet's going to be North Creek, I assume.
Yes, yes. So you can see on this map.
Justin,
yes.
question, is there going to be any areas where vehicles aren't permitted and it's just pedestrian walkways?
There are some areas that are going to be pedestrian only, and some that would be flex spaces that could be used during like a street festival, could shut down to cars during that specific event.
We'll get to those slides.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of these questions are great, and maybe for the interest of time, the better response from us is we're about to get there because we'll be covering a lot. We have slides on a lot of these specific questions.
Yeah. So one of the ideas for stormwater for this plan is to provide a regional stormwater facility. So instead of having each developer develop their own vault and stormwater system, we build one centralized facility that would cover the entire sub area north of 164th, which is great for developers because they don't have to worry about building it, and great for the city because it's much easier to manage one facility than manage, a dozen or more. And we would most likely be paying for that with a latecome agreement where developers would pay their share when they develop.
And then the other advantage of this is because of the sponge park function and because of a lot of the stormwater improvements, it essentially automatically qualifies us for our stormwater staff member was extremely excited about all the grants that that are designed specifically for these kinds of projects. And there's a large amount of state and federal dollars that could be used also to offset these costs.
So currently, are there multiple vaults?
No vault at all, is there?
If there are vaults, I'm not 100% sure, but I think a lot of it's drained straight into the creek. It's not being.
Yeah, it just goes
yeah.
into the pond and it takes care of the whole shopping area. That's
Yeah,
why it was
either
originally
goes to the
designed.
pond or it drains directly to the creek. It's the current stormwater situation is not great for North Creek. So it's gonna be a much better improvement. It's gonna have more detention and more water quality improvements.
Did we have any flooding issues in the 100-year storm we had a couple of weeks ago? Was North Creek like 20 feet deep or anything?
No.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think there's any flooding issues here.
Well, the other issue too is you have a 36-inch line that Alderwood put in back in the 60s. It goes on this side of North Creek all the way down, which is what the flooding is down here south of 164th. That's all mounded.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, are we looking at any kind of like LEED certification and such, like any green building certifications for like city
That's-
planning?
We haven't addressed it in this presentation. We have talked to our consultant about possibly doing that. We've been considering ideas that would involve perhaps to get to the highest height limit, you'd have to provide certain benefits to the city that could include LEED certification or amenities provided to the public as part of a package that developers could use to get their full height limit. But we haven't developed that yet.
But these are the exact kind of ideas and suggestions that we're looking to solicit in these presentations.
Mhm.
The whole point of this is before we get too down the track and we only get a couple revisions on our plan, our redevelopment plan, we'd rather have this conversation with planning commission, DRB, volunteer boards and council. And if there's any things like that where, you know, we don't want to get at the end of this process and be like, oh, would have been great if we would have asked about that. The idea is let's just talk to you now. Let's get these inputs and ideas, and then we can, you know, bring it back to our consultant and have ideas reintegrated so that the next time we bring it forward to this body and to other bodies, we were able to at least address, or we can at least say, hey, you know, you had this great idea. We talked about it. It got shot down by council, that kind of thing. You know, so like we can at least address, you know, what made or what didn't make, that kind of thing.
Right, covered this. So again, it's just an illustration of what would happen. The top here is, or the top image is what it would look like if during a typical winter drizzle. Again, it's the stormwater does not flood that stormwater facility or the sponge park. And then the second one is during a 10-year storm. I'm sorry, the biggest annual storm you could get, and the lowest one would be that 10 or 25-year storm. It would fill that sponge pond facility. All right, so here is the proposed street grid and street types. Currently, Mill Creek Boulevard goes from 527 and continues down to 164th. We propose a slight change at the intersection of Mill Creek Boulevard and Main Street to where Main Street would, instead of Mill Creek Boulevard continuing to 164th, it'd be Main Street continuing all the way down, and Mill Creek Boulevard would end at Main Street, that T intersection. So in red, you can see that's the Main Street. This would be the primary commercial street. This is where the retail would be focused and required. It would include parallel parking and a two-way cycle track to get through the sub area. Mill Creek Boulevard would be a similar facility, although the sidewalks would be slightly narrower because it wouldn't be expected to have as much pedestrian traffic. These solid blue lines are secondary building access streets. This is where parking garage entrances or utility collection pickups. This is where all those will be located. Then we have this orange color, which you can find around Central Park. These are imagined as curbless streets, which would allow car traffic normally, but could be shut down during events such as like a street festival, a street fair, those kinds of things. And then you have private access drives, which are the light blue dashes, and then pedestrian-only paths, which are up here between Mill Creek Boulevard and an as of yet unnamed street, and then connecting Mill Creek Boulevard to North Creek Trail, and then through the parks connecting 161st to the North Creek Trail, and then down connecting one of these building access streets to 164th and 527.
So currently the North Creek Trail comes out behind, what is it, China City or somewhere just south of there. So it doesn't go all the way down to 164th currently, is that correct?
Correct.
Is that going to be extended at some point, or are the property owners sort of saying, no, thank you very much?
Yeah, so this plan, I mean, ideally you would extend it all the way down to 164th, but you still have the issue of crossing 164th. So this plan's envisioning is an extra wide sidewalk or multi-use path that would go along the street, similar to what you have with at the Burt Gilman, when it goes to Ballard. You have the sidewalk and you have a multi-use path next to it to connect North Creek Trail to 164th, and then we can continue the trail once it goes down to 9th.
So it would go down to the park then? The south
Yeah,
end,
it would
south
continue
end of
to
9th.
connect where the existing connection to Mill Creek Boulevard is, but then we'd have that extra wide multi-use path for the trails to continue. So it wouldn't be.
But for actually getting it from the what you're talking about, because, you know, once you get it over 164th, how does it connect?
Then
up
you're
to
on
you?
Ninth and you got that shot, then you got the park all the way at the south end.
Mhm.
So what we have cooking for that one is that won't be addressed by this specific plan for that part that's outside. this
Another
bubble
day.
area. But we do have the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that's on the work plan for this year, maybe next year, depending on what council decides with future annexation decisions. That's one of our big priorities with the PROS plan is to try to connect with high quality trail connections and bicycle path and pedestrian path connections to the North Creek Trail. And then also potentially, depending on with council's direction that we take, also connected the interurban trail further west. So that is to answer your question. What this plan will do will connect the North Creek Trail via street to down to that area, but to actually connect it to the actual North Creek Park further down the road, that's going to have to be part of the PROS plan.
Another day.
Mhm.
Yeah, another
Okay.
day. But we share the same idea it's a big priority for us, at least from a recreations perspective.
Thank
Another
you.
question I had was, are we looking at, or did we look at probably doing underground parking, which then removes a lot of surface parking, gives us more space for retail?
Unfortunately, the ground is really wet. It would probably not make sense to do underground parking. So we're envisioning, we also don't want surface parking. So we're envisioning a mix of on-street parking, which we're adding. Currently there is, Mill Creek Boulevard has, I think, 6 spots, but there will be on-street parking the entire length once this is built out. And a mix of off-street parking garages that are at ground level and wrapped by a building, or on a second level, but disguised. So it won't be underground, but it'll be structured.
Another idea that we just got feedback from internal staff meetings today to consider potential sites for a park and ride or some kind of other, but parking is going to be a major consideration on here. And just hearing these questions and concerns about that, that's also helpful for us because, you know, when we do a wrap up in our summaries and our engagement reports for our consultant, we can continue reiterating that it's not just, you know, it's not just grumpy Director Ryan talking about parking, but it's also, we've heard from DRB, we've heard from Planning Commission, we've heard from Public Safety. We need to make sure that we're appropriately parking this development.
Personally, I would hope you don't do a park and ride within this complex here. Put it up
No,
on,
not within.
put it up on 132nd. I mean, I'm thinking of U Village. Okay, parking garage is great. Before they built that, trying to find parking was a real pain. And once they put in that parking garage, makes a world of difference. You know, they got the restaurants down on the first level, and I think Din Tai Fung's even on the second level.
Yeah.
And then you've got multi-stories, easy to get in and out of.
Yeah.
But before that was built, going to U Village was a pain. It wasn't fun. And so I appreciate your comment about having a parking and wrapping it with commercial. I've seen that in other places. It may not be enough because it's if you're going to have the vertical ability, that would be wonderful because parking will become a premium. It already is. I mean, look at the impact on LA Fitness to the people who have retail shops up by LA Fitness. Their customers have nowhere to go. They got to park 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away. LA Fitness was not a good thing for the city. And unfortunately, when they talked about converting the Columbia Athletic Club into LA Fitness, they didn't put any strings around it because I think it's had a very negative effect. So maybe it'll go away. But parking really is a critical issue when you're talking about all this because we have all the trails and all that, and you have the bike trails. Granted, we have a lot of people who have bikes, but not necessarily coming down the Mill Creek Road.
Coming down's fine. It's going back.
Yeah, it's going back up.
Another, just to add to that, another, I think, great example, because I went there recently, was, I think, Overlake in Kirkland. That's a really good one too, because you're able to park in a vertical structure and then just have pedestrian only and retails all along. Just where the Cinemark is in Kirkland, that's a good.
I think another thing that we can kind of consider that impacts parking supply is also, you know, the city doesn't have any parking regulations on time limits to park, or we don't have any metered parking. I'm not saying we're doing metered parking, so before everyone freaks out, I'm just saying that, you know, we don't have any on the book regulations about, you know, you can just park anywhere you want for 24 hours. And I think 24 hours is maybe our max. But what I'm saying though is that, you know, there is also additional considerations that can ease parking supply is just doing some demand management.
Yeah,
If we're-
and the other thing, most of the parking in the area is private anyway. I mean, you see, when you go into the Safeway parking lot and elsewhere, you see Martin Towing and et cetera. But the city can really only deal with the public streets.
Mhm.
Beyond that, there's no clout. It's the property owner who's got to deal with it. But I agree with you, there is nothing. So if I were to take the orange bus or the green line or whatever, which very few people ride anyway, but if I were to take that, I could just park on the street forever. I agree with you. There needs to be a time limit. You know, if it's around restaurants or not, you better give them more than 20 minutes.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, that's one of the issues we've had in, near the farm, where on the on-street parking, there's no time limit. So people who live there don't want to pay for the parking in the structured area, which goes unused. They park on the street because there's no time limit. So if we had like a 3-hour time limit, plenty of time to do your shopping, your restaurants, but force people who are there to actually use the parking garages they have available on the off-street.
Yeah.
So it is something we are exploring, and it's something that's certainly trying to make sure that as we bring this closer to adoption, there's probably going to be a whole raft of regulations and enforcement policies. Parking might be one of those, in addition to other ordinances.
Well, I hope they would do a better job of parking design than the farm over there. I go over to the Comcast shop. That parking lot's miserable. The design is terrible. It's a little bit like the Safeway parking lot out on 132nd. You come in and you got parking this way, and you got to go circle around. And that particular one, I was there today, and getting in and out of there is terrible.
Yeah.
Very poor design. Hopefully they'll do better on this. Anyway, thank you for answering the question.
Yeah. So this slide is about the bike and pedestrian routes. It's not great to walk around in the sub area now, unless you're on one of the few streets, you're walking through a parking lot, or even if you're on one of the public streets, there's often not sidewalks. So all the new streets would be required to have sidewalks, and along the primary commercial, they're pretty wide. You have a 10-foot wide sidewalk and a 6-foot wide tree and furniture zone. So plenty of space for pedestrians to walk around. We also have two-way cycle tracks on Main Street and Mill Creek Boulevard to get through the sub area. And then again, there's a couple pros dedicated pedestrian paths, either in the parks or in these areas which are being more residential focused.
And those are the ones that have the bollards on either end, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Retractable for fire access. Yeah.
Sure.
Actually, the North Creek Trail will need to be slightly widened and strengthened to act as a fire access road to provide access to fire vehicles in case of emergency.
That makes sense, especially with all the growth down there.
So here are the commercial requirements for the street frontages. The red highlighted areas are areas of street frontage that will be required to have commercial retail. The purple are also required, but 50% of the frontage would be required to have commercial. And then the rest of the frontages would be probably a mix of commercial and residential. And these are just the required commercial. Ground floor commercial will be allowed throughout the sub area if there's demand for it. But these are where it'd be required. You can't build without having these retail focused areas.
So it'd be similar to the combination behind China City, Altera, I think it's called. Commercial on the first floor and condos above.
Exactly, yeah.
So a little bit like West Seattle going down California.
Yeah, exactly. You have a level of commercial, maybe residential, maybe a level of office or more commercial, and then above that you had to have residential.
Okay, makes sense.
Or like even like the villages at Totem Lake or in Woodinville, a lot of those new developments. That's when they went through this. When this area was originally zoned as part of the comp plan, they did a walking tour of a couple different mixed use developments of kind of the inspiration for this. And like Woodinville, Bothell. Bothell was kind of cited as like, maybe we don't want it to look like Bothell, but the
Bothell's got some good ones though. When you get down toward
it's got some
slough.
There's some good stuff, and there's some stuff that maybe I'm not crazy about. But Woodinville, there's all those developments, and then like the villages at Totem Lake is another often cited example is kind of how these could look.
How many stories above are we going?
Well, that's part of the EIS.
Okay.
The EIS is evaluating three, as Justin talked about. You know, there's the base right now. This entire town center is zoned right now for 60 feet. It's about 5 or 6. It's about 5 stories. Mixed in. There's no commercial ground floor requirement right now under the current zoning regulations. The highest level of density that that is being evaluated per the EIS is going up to 85 feet. And then
Be 7 stories.
but 7 to 8 stories, yeah. And then the third option is having variable heights. And having a mixture of some areas are 60 feet, some areas are 85 feet. And that'll be one of the main decisions that council will have to make, is at what density and intensity that they want to allow.
Yep.
Your priority commercial retail, I assume, includes restaurants.
Yes.
Correct. Restaurants, shopping, art gallery, stuff like that, like stuff that's pedestrian activating and sales tax generating and is,
Shopping, eating.
shopping, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're becoming, you want to make it a draw.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, it looks like we're going to end again.
We've got 9 minutes left.
We are,
If we quit asking questions, we'll get done.
I'll be
You
quiet.
can see
Is that
that.
the-
I'll
is
be
that
quiet,
the
Mr. Chairman.
this might
Here, I'll
be,
turn it off.
from what I understand, this might be the most lively DRB meeting we've had in a few years, so welcome change.
Yeah, we still have 9 minutes left. And you can see that there's a commercial focused all around that central park. So you can see that there's the north end of the park, the commercial blends seamlessly into the park. You can imagine, restaurants or retail with seating or patios that directly meld into the park in that area. And then around the other sides, you have those curbless streets, which would be, they will allow cars, but it would still be, you can imagine a park surrounded by cafes, restaurants, retail, a great place to come, recreate, spend your money, have a good time.
From a programmatic perspective, our vision on this was Mill Creek needs a true heart. It needs a place to where you could have movies in the park and you could have festivals every time there's a Veterans Day parade, every time there's a Christmas parade. It always ends in the central park, always ends in the same spot. When we have our festivals, we have festival grounds, there could be a pavilion. The idea is that having kind of a jewel and then lining it with high quality retail and residential and luxury housing means that you're going to be able to kind of create this really memorable urban space that has just incredible views of this park and then the forest.
Sort of like the south end of Bellevue with their park.
Oh, never been to Bellevue, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
you come down the main drag in Bellevue and you got your big park.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then
You ought to go see it.
I'll have to go check it out. Is it beautiful? I hope it's beautiful.
Yeah.
mixed use all around it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's really cool.
And the benefit is that all that commercial area, you'll be able to see the park, and then beyond the park, the green belt. So you're really connecting to the nature and the park space, and everything is, melded together. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the design standards that we have been looking at. So along street frontages, there's going to be 2 primary types of frontages. You've got the residential frontages. So those are the areas that are going to be primarily residential. And you can see an example image here and here where the residential has a transition zone from the sidewalk and the street to the residential area. You have perhaps 2 to 6 feet of height difference, unless you need ADA access, and plantings that provide differentiating between the public realm and the private realm, where people can feel slightly insulated from that street, but it's not far, not like it's a barrier, but it's a transition.
So it's really like the area north of the LA Fitness as you go up toward the big apartments. They've got that area on either side where you have a break, very similar to what you have photographed
Like
here.
Woodside Walk.
Yeah.
It
And-
opened up to.
Yeah, when you're going north past LA Fitness, when you look at this photograph, very similar, that the units are set back with some gardening and landscaping.
Imagine
whatnot,
landscaping or little stoops or patios where people can,
Which
sit
makes
and,
sense.
talk to your neighbors and whatnot. Whereas the commercial frontages would have the retail come right up to the street side, the sidewalk edge. And so you'd have to promote people interacting between the shops and the sidewalks. All right, so there's also proposed to be transition zones around the perimeter of the sub area. So think along 527, 164th, and then between the sub area and North Town Center, where there'd be slightly different some restrictions to make sure that it transitions smoothly from those realms to the sub area. Those include two things. One, floor plate size reductions. So if you look at this picture here, you can see that at the ground level, the first 30 feet or so, it's a continuous, built area. But then above that first 30 feet, there's a gap between the area of the building that extends the full height and where it could extend again. So you'd have a 50-foot gap between full height areas, and those full height areas can be 70 feet long.
So in theory, if you're in 527, you've got 1 story, you step back, and then you could have 6 stories. In other words, is this what I understand coming off 527, or is it off all the streets?
So yeah, around along 527 and 164th. So you can imagine you'd have the ground level would be 1 or 2 stories high, and then above that you would have like 3 or 4 levels of.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're not driving through a tunnel.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
In addition to that, there would also be upper level setbacks. So once you get above 60 feet, you need to step back 10 feet to provide
You can have an outside deck or something.
Exactly. You could have, which is great because those are great amenity spaces. Imagine you have that's all balcony space, and you can look at the trail, the trees, and it's a great place for people who live there to spend time.
Roof gardens would be a good one too.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it'll be a visual break basically for us as pedestrians walking through, because you'll have like these setbacks in the buildings and.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see further slides, kind of a big design philosophy out this is focusing on the first 30. Because the first 30 feet of a building is what most pedestrians interact with. And so putting your design focus on that first 30 is really going to kind of elevate from a human perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So there's also standards around building massing to make sure you don't have huge overbearing buildings that feel like they're oppressive. So there's emphasis on creating variety. So massing should have visual interest in a variety of different scales. There should be visual clues in massing that differentiate different building uses. It should be contextual. So it shouldn't feel like it's a totally different environment from town center. It should feel like there's a continuity between the old and the new. Additionally, the buildings should be masked so that they're not shading open spaces in parks where possible. So north-south orientations are better to allow that the sunlight in. And then additionally, limiting the building length to 180 feet. So you wouldn't have the blocks are around 350 feet on their sides. So instead of having one massive building that occupies the entire city block, you can only fit, if it's 180 feet length, you'd have to fit 4 buildings in. So you don't have one massive edifice, you have smaller, different, interesting looking buildings.
And that's also how you prevent.
So is the 180 just plucked from air?
It's a number our consultant recommended. And because our
180
goal
feet, that's a long building.
Yeah.
It is, but it depends on the scale. We were trying to avoid what we have at the farm, where you have building E on the south side of 133rd. I believe is 600 feet long or so.
Ugly.
And it's long, and it feels it's not interesting because it's just one big building. So we want to make sure these are smaller buildings that are.
You can certainly ask our architect how they arrived at 180 feet. We kind of trust it. We're like, all right, well, you're the professional pretty building maker, so we'll trust you on the 180. But to your point, though, we can certainly ask that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long building.
Mm-hmm.
When you go down the Bothell Highway and you go down south of 180th and you get down toward the Pancake House, you see the back of that long building. All the entries are on the east side. And you got that big ugly building going all the way down.
Well, I think it's why like I said, I'm not sure why 180 was selected, but I think probably it relates to the pro formas of buildings and like what's actually buildable at scale, like what scales are required, like what's the biggest building you can get before it starts getting really ugly. And I think 180 is probably that number. But the idea though is that more so than anything, by limiting the building length, you're gonna get a better, it's better to have separations between
Yeah.
buildings and.
Well, and I think that's true. It depends on the length of the block.
Right.
Because if you have a short block, 180 feet is going to take up they're going to take the whole thing. If you have a short block, maybe you have a 60-foot building or whatever, so you can break it up. Because one long building on a short block is going to look terrible.
Yeah, the proposed blocks are around 300 to 350 feet. So you get basically 2 buildings per block at a maximum of 2 buildings per block. So
Gotcha.
the whole block, you'd have 4 buildings in one each corner.
Well, maybe it becomes a minimum of 2 buildings per block.
Right. I was about to suggest, I wonder if it would be better direction to just say that a building length can be no longer than like 60% or 50% of
The block.
a block.
Yeah.
There's something like some
That would
kind of
break it up.
percentage thing, so you have a variable number. I think the only cautionary tale on that might be is that if you have a short block, then requiring 60% of a short block, then you might have a pretty goofy looking building.
Then you'd have to put a percentage on the.
Yeah, they're not on yet.
Can I ask my question or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question was, is there going to be like a visual walkthrough or a model that the architects are going to create for this? Just to even figure out like how the massing is going to look like?
They are developing. There we go. They are developing some massing models. They're waiting until we have everything. They're only developing one set, so we're getting those once we've decided on the basics. But yeah, it's the massing models are tough because they're just gray blocks of we're trying not to show the massing models until what I'm trying to say is massing models they're ugly to the general public because they don't have any of the building textures or windows, but we will have those massing models available at the final
More
plan.
importantly, you don't know what the developers are going to put in. So you have no idea if it's going to be a 4-story building or a 3-story building.
Right. But they'll be based on the maximum, if they develop the maximum level, what it would look like.
It's also going to be heavily dependent on what council decides with what.
Sure, what the developer decides.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if council says, yeah, let's go 85 feet, let's rock and roll, let's go max density, then that massing model is going to look very different than if they just say, you know what, we do not want density, we just want the lowest level that we can get. That's what we zoned. Let's just go that. Then that could.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to build a model if you don't know what's going to go in there.
Yeah. But to your question, there will be massing models, but at the end of the process, those will be available to see. So additionally, there'll be requirements around secondary articulation. So, we've limited the building size. Now we're making sure that there's articulation and modulation along the facade. So vertical modulation, you can see examples here how vertically there's different elements that provide visual interest. We want to set up a rhythm. So, make sure your windows and your material choice creates a rhythm and cohesive composition to the buildings. And then integrate modulation elements. So features such as decks or patios or bay windows, but not bolt-on balconies, Juliet balconies, which don't actually
Amen.
provide. Yeah,
They look terrible.
exactly. They don't look good and they don't provide any benefit to the residents who live in them. And then there's going to be a large focus on the human scale aspect. So the first 30 feet or so, which is what you see as a pedestrian primarily. So making sure that there is storefronts that are interesting and there's interesting patterns, those storefronts, requiring clear glass along the commercial areas and providing seating opportunities for people who are walking along. Additionally, overhead weather protection, either arcades or awnings or various ways to protect from inclement weather. And ground level activation, so making sure you have retail that's highly visible and along those commercial corridors, and residential areas, private stoops or patios or entryways. And then there'll be requirements on materials and finishes. So This is similar to the existing town center. There is the requirement to provide sort of natural type materials for a percentage. First proposal is 50% of the facade. So, masonry or metal or wood. Our consultant also said concrete. Well, we're trying to decide how you choose what acceptable level of concrete is for that facade. So we have, there's good and bad concrete.
Well, you have
Facade.
Marblecrete as an example, which is totally different than straight concrete.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is to have high quality exterior sidings for a large percentage of the building.
And I think if I could grab and take, that's one of the ones, this is one of the issues we'd really like input from the DRB on, is when we're looking at the building materials, do we want to mandate that there has to be two separate building materials? I think the problem with that is that there's a lot of great looking single material buildings out there, right? Like I think, mass timber is a great example. Or, if we do, when there is things that are like, do we want 50%? Should we have a specific set of rules specific to concrete about like, look, if you're going to do concrete, you can do it, but there's some very specific guidelines in how it has to look and how it has to be polished. Like, and the same thing applies to glass. And if there is a glass facade and something along those lines, like there's just very specific rules that these materials have to follow. Because I think with the way that the state is going with DRB and limiting DRB design review board control over and influence over developing, essentially we have to create an objective design criteria that us as a planning staff can apply, because we're being limited for bringing more things to you all before. So that's kind of one of the big questions is what your input as how we should govern, because we can't just say make it look nice and then have Justin and Sybil be the arbiters of what looks nice.
Well, see, that's a difficult process because there are a lot of buildings that are concrete and they put them up in panels and they're great. There are a lot of ugly ones too.
Yeah.
And so it's really more of a design feature that the architect is presenting for the developer that says, what do you think? And you might look at it and think, oh my God, it looks like it came from Russia, and so I don't know how you're going to come up with that one as a design review, because it really depends on the overall appearance, including the glass that's used along with it.
Yeah. No brutalism. Maybe that's.
I mean, a slab wall. I mean, you look at some of these old apartment houses and they're slabs and they're really ugly. But some of the more modern uses where they have bends and whatnot in the concrete look much better. But
Yeah.
that's a tough one. I don't know how you're going to work around that one.
It's gonna be tricky, but we're definitely gonna be involved, or we'll be asking the DRB for your help with that. We're going to be looking at the existing town center design guidelines that were passed in 2004 or 5. I can't remember the exact year. Look at those, pull out what worked for town center, what didn't work, what we can apply to this area, combine with the recommendations from our consultant, and then develop these new guidelines, and then bring them to you and say, hey, does this work? Is this going to produce the kind of buildings we want to see that are going to be something we can be proud of?
Because one of the important things about North Town Center is that, once the South Town Center is done, it's all just going to be one town center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we don't want to necessarily just limit the South Town Center just to make it look like up north. But we want to have some common design elements that are shared throughout the entire corridor. So that way that there's the entire area is one distinct place, and there can be evolution and changes of buildings and stuff like that. But we think that, it would be better served if there were some common design themes that link the two areas and bridges it together. So it creates a single.
Well, that makes sense. And the part of the problem with what we have right now is it's different. So when you got to town center and then you have North Town Center, it's already different. And then when it was put together, it was different. When they did the main town center, I know there were a few buildings that were put in North Town Center, and one restaurant in particular. City got after him because he put a sign out there that they were open, and the city said, you can't do that. And the guy went belly up. But the design in the North Town Center is a little different than the main town center. I agree with you that it has to be, homogeneous, if you will, all the way down. It'll look better. So you're not in two different neighborhoods.
Yeah. Or at least have some common things that link it.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Agree. One question on this is also related to sustainability. Are we in any way looking into or providing criterias around low carbon concrete, going more for bio-based materials, any of that?
So that's one of the things that we kind of talked about with, like, one idea was if council was comfortable with applying density bump, like going up maybe a little higher than we originally anticipated. Let's say for argument's sake that they decide to 85 feet density is okay. One idea is instead of making it by right going up to 85, say by right at 60, but you can go up to 85 if you use mass timber, if you use these environmentally sustainable materials, or you could also make it a pay to play kind of thing, right? Where you say, you can go up to 85 if you are, paying into the park system or you're paying into the infrastructure system. Pretty much, make it so that they can pay for that additional height through an in lieu fee or through just building through a more sustainable or local building material kind of thing. That's just one of those things where we've kind of toyed with the idea, but it's how it manifests in the plan is a little bit maybe dependent on how we view density. And I think the other thing, my only caution is what's the old joke about a camel is what you get when you draw a horse by committee. And the concern is if you start affixing too many requirements for some of these sustainability things, then you keep adding additional requirements, it's going to make developments more difficult to pencil. And I think my concern with that is, given the state of the market and the sensitivity of the construction market to externalities that we have no control over, stuff like lumber prices and tariffs with Canada. Oh, I think, am I back on? Am I back off? I think all the online folks are off the call anyways.
Yeah.
So I think once you start getting to the other different things that can go into how a building pencils, my only caution is requiring those kinds of practices can also add cost to the development. And if we want this to happen, I would like to this thing. I would rather have a buildable and workable Southtown Center than an unbuildable and perfect plan.
Well, one that's going to be successful, because you put in too much, your price can be too high, then you have an albatross.
Right.
The other issue with 85 feet, if you're building condos or apartments, parking. So you have to be cognizant of that. Altera over here behind China City, the parking garage is not owned by the people living in Altera. It's owned by somebody separate, which is really sort of a screwball thing. Why that was ever done, I don't know. But if you want a parking space, you have to rent it from the owner of the parking garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just,
And
there are a few things to be considered in here.
from a graphic standpoint, I don't think that's a very good picture to talk about building materials.
Yeah.
Somebody sees that, that's not what we want downtown Mill Creek, Southtown
Nor do you
Center
want-
to look like.
Nor do you want them across from each other that close.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe a tunnel.
that's a really bad picture that could really turn people off.
Noted. We'll make sure we revise that.
Yeah, so additionally, there's requirements on having protecting materials, so they're cleanable or graffiti resistant. Limiting the use of fiber cement to upper levels of buildings where allowed, so you can't have it at the ground floor. Have unique building detailing and differentiating by use. The commercial should look different than residential. Just street views, we're almost done. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go through some quick street sections just to see what those could look like. Here's an example of coming down the hill, Mulkey Boulevard into sub area. Connecting to 527, you have these 8-foot wide sidewalks, 6-foot wide planting strips, cycle track, and then where it connects to 527, you'd have turn lanes, but then further in, those will turn into parking spaces. Similarly, it looks similar on Main Street, the main commercial area, although the sidewalks are bumped out to 10 feet instead of 8 feet to provide more width for the pedestrian activity to expect walking around the commercial areas.
Hopefully you'll allow more room for the trees. The trees we have now are all tearing up the sidewalks because their spread on their limbs is too wide.
Yeah,
So-
so
Now, hopefully they use a tree that goes maybe 6 feet wide because that's where the roots are gonna go. And
We have a
we've
plan
got
for
some
that.
out there where the trees are really wide and the roots are taking off and ripping up the sidewalks.
We have a plan for that.
Yeah, we just went through that.
here's an interesting area. So this would be north of the park. You'd have this pedestrian promenade, which could be used, to either we're walking through or cycling through. But then during events, you could have tents for, you could have food trucks, you could have, street fairs or farmers markets, and it would blend seamlessly into this sidewalk area for the retail. You could have, patios for outside dining, or little, pocket park areas for seating.
So you mentioned outside dining. That's been an issue here over the years, is restaurants encroaching onto sidewalks.
Mhm.
And that's been a problem in many cities, but some cities have actually allowed, the first 10 feet out for seating, just to accommodate the restaurants
Mhm.
because the demand is there. So hopefully that's under consideration.
Yeah, we're trying to design it, trying to have designs that would accommodate seating. That North Gateway Park had dedicated area just for seating. They could have restaurants could have seating out there. But then again, on the normal frontages, they'd have to maintain, these sidewalks would be wider than town center already, but then you would have to, and they probably have to design the outside seating, the padding areas. But it could be that we have a program to maybe if the restaurant really thinks there's, well, I won't.
Well, the city basically leases the sidewalk to the restaurant
Mhm.
for a fee.
In
That's
North,
been done in other cities.
in existing town center, the city doesn't actually own the sidewalk. It's actually owned by the property owners.
Oh,
They have
okay.
an easement. They have to maintain the sidewalk, which we would not be doing here. The city would have, it'd be in the right of way for this type of
Gotcha.
area. Here's an example of along the park, angle parking to provide a little more parking along for visitors to the park, as well as these curbless streets that could be converted into thoroughfares during festivals or large events. Similarly, on the south side of the park, again, curbless parking that would provide those areas for large events. And then here's an example of what the more residential areas would look like. You can see it's very similar to the commercial areas, except that the sidewalks are a little narrower because you don't need that additional width to accommodate the traffic. And you'd also expect to have more planting in these planting strips as opposed to having more street furniture or seating areas. So next steps, we have, just a reminder, we have our volunteer board workshop on the 28th. We'd encourage everyone to attend. We really value your feedback. We got great feedback on the first workshop in August.
And for the volunteer board workshop, we're gonna operate it like we did for the last one, where, we'll have design review board, planning commission, hopefully we'll have parks and rec, arts and beautification. And youth advisory board was also really amazing in that meeting as well. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna break everyone up so that it's not just the design review board people over here and planning commission here, and we have
Yeah.
to figure out where to put David Hamilton. So now what we're gonna do is, so everyone's gonna get into different different group. There'll be kind of smaller group discussions to talk about these issues, and then we can kind of in a more organized way capture information and be able to.
Oh, where and when?
That would be on the
28th.
I see
28th.
the 28th, but what time of day? And
At
where?
5:30 here in council chambers. We'll be sending out a reminder email tomorrow. Yeah.
And then on the 3rd of March, we're going to be doing the EIS draft meeting with city council, and we'll be publishing our EIS fairly soon. And at the end of that, then after we've gone through, I think it's 30-day comment period.
The 45-day comment period.
45-day comment
Yeah.
period. Then after the end of the 45-day comment period, and then the EIS is finalized, then we can proceed with making decisions about what kind of density scenarios we want to move.
Will the EIS be on the website?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be published on the website on the 27th, I believe.
I'm out of town on the 3rd of March. I just thought it'd be interesting to read it if it's available.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you want to submit comments, you're more than welcome to. We'll have on the website an area to submit comments and review the draft.
And then then after we do the formal draft review and council, we'll be continuing to come back. We haven't put it on here because we haven't scheduled anything, but there'll be, once we have the design review guidelines more formalized and finalized, we'll be again coming back to discuss it with y'all to make sure that our criteria is well defined. And again, the trick is we have to have we need to make some really objective design criteria, because we're as planners, we have to approve buildings without design review board approval. And so we want to make sure that as our architects are developing those and we approve them, that we're coordinating that with DRB. And then we'll also be doing, I mean, there's fortunately, this should be an exciting year for DRB because we have a ton of stuff to talk about with you guys.
I think you guys have the exciting year. We just get to watch.
And we're looking at, maybe it gets done earlier, but if I'm being a realistic person, then I think summer 26 is probably a good time frame. And then at that, then my mission completely changes. It goes from plan adoption to advertising and cheerleading and trying to get people interested in coming to and trying to gin up interest. So.
Well, I appreciate what you've done, Justin. This is very informative. Learned a lot more tonight than I could read anywhere else, and been very good. You got a lot of work ahead of you.
We do indeed. And then we added some more information onto this presentation that was in the packet. So we'll update the packet online to see if you want these slides that we showed today. There's some more information on the standards.
And before we wrap up, I also just want to state that as I hope we've conveyed, we want input. We want your opinions on this. If there's something that you absolutely hate of what we're proposing, now is the time to tell us. Like for example, some really great feedback that we got from staff today was, and it kind of falls in line with some comments from planning commission, is they really hated the idea of putting a road through the Central Park and the Sponge Park. They're like, why are we bifurcating that? Like, why can't we just make the road go around? Well, there's some other considerations why, but that's the kind of thing where we need to hear it from, we'd like to hear it from you too. If that's something that you absolutely want us to explore as well, that's that kind of thing. The other kind of general broad question is, how are we doing? Is this generally in line with what you expected from a master plan? Is this the kind of thing that you would like to see in this master plan? Is there anything is there any, is it going well? Is there anything you're like, look, you guys are really missing the mark on parking, or you guys are really missing the mark on this design thing. These are going to get some ugly buildings. These are the kind of questions we would really like, general comments that we are happy to take. You don't have to do it now. You don't have to be on the spot. If at 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and I should have.
I thought we badgered you quite well tonight.
When you're putting the minutes together, would you be good enough to record that the off-site people didn't come in after 80 minutes? That we went down to 3 board members?
Oh, yeah. So
Just from an attendance standpoint. And we still had a quorum, so there was no issue with that. Yeah, good.
Well, we're not really voting on anything now.
Oh, we aren't voting on anything, no. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments?
I move we adjourned.
Okay, is there a second? Yep, so we have a motion that's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Assuming there's no discussion, we're adjourned.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you.
5-1.
Yeah.
Exciting. Will be interesting next week.
Pleasure meeting you finally.
Same. It's so good to kind of
The what?
see people in person. I was attending these over the video and I'm like, oh, this is nice to hear person.
Well, I was fine in all the words I said.